Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Cinema Savvy. You are joined by myself, Tate, and we are doing yet another retrospective review. Once again, themed with a film that is going to be coming out very, very soon. Very, very excited that it's going to be very, very close now to release. Oh my god, I cannot wait. Today, we're going to be looking back at 28 Weeks Later, the 2007 film, the sequel to 28 Days Later, and what will be considered to be the prequel to 28 Years Later and The Bone Temple, which are the two films that are going to be coming out across the next year. We got 28 Years Later coming out this week, and we've got 28 Years, The Bone Temple, coming out next year. I'm very, very excited to talk about this film. If you've watched 28 Years, then please leave a comment down below. I want to hear what your thoughts are on the film. Its comparisons to the first film are going to be made here today in the review. Don't worry about that. But I'd like to see what your thoughts are on the film. Do you hold it in higher regard than the first film? I know that some people may do. Where do you think it sits within the franchise and the different risks that it took, the different director and everything like that? Did it all pay off in the end? And be sure to follow us on our socials. The link is down in the description, and the Redbubble link there is there as well to pick up merch like the pillow I have in the background and stuff like that. So let's talk about 28 Years Later. The IMDb plot synopsis of it is 6 months after the rage virus was inflicted on the population of Great Britain, the US Army helps to secure a small area of London for the survivors to repopulate and start again, but not everything goes to plan. So we're left with different characters to the first film, seeing different areas of survival, and just a different vibe from the first film. First film felt very kind of handheld camcordery and very kind of guerrilla style filmmaking. I used as a term in the first review. Please go and check that out if you haven't. But this film felt a lot more Hollywoody, a lot more clean, a lot more focused on various different things. They brought in different characters, they brought in different cast, and also they brought in a different director for this film as well. And I have very weird first memories of this film. It's very unusual that you ever get this kind of introduction to a film before, but I remember seeing clips of the famous scene from this film, the most famous scene from this film, possibly the most famous scene in any 28 days slash weeks slash years film. It's the opening scene. It's the opening scene. I saw it multiple times on YouTube before I even watched the full film, and then I watched the full film a few years later. It's a phenomenal scene to be introduced to the film, and I know that at the time, I remember people saying it's the best scene in the film. The film kind of goes downhill after that, and that's what kind of put me away from watching the full film for the first time. Just one of those like, oh, if this is the best scene in the film, if this is like the peak, and then it really does dip in quality after that. I had a few questions in my head. Why did it dip in quality? And secondly, really, does the film dip that low? Is it really not that good for the rest of it? I watched it. I enjoyed it. And I'll talk about that as well. But I can completely understand now why the opening scene is regarded so highly, and can also understand why the quality, or at least the different tones the film switches and changes from that opening scene. So production for this film was very different to the first film. Of course, the first film was a lot of the filming was done not legally, but kind of out of the way of kind of public eye and stuff like that. Filmed in the early hours of the morning to get those famous shots of London and everything like that. This film was a lot more kind of substantial in the fact that it was kind of filmed with kind of, actual permissions taking place and not having to do kind of the guerrilla filmmaking styles that they had to in the first film. Not only that, but they used kind of more of actual sets. It was filmed in London at Free Mill Studio. And Boyle did not return to the film. He was working on Sunshine, which I absolutely adore. Sunshine is a phenomenal film. Really is one of my favorite sci-fi films of all time. So he can only come back as executive producer. Even Alex Garland was also working on Sunshine at the time. So he came on for a bit of the writing process and helped out in little parts, but most of the writing process was done by Rowan Yoff, or Yoffe, and then by the director Juan Carlos Fresnadillo. So they kind of took over the majority of the roles. Boyle actually came on as executive producer and hired Fresnadillo as he liked the film Intacto, which I haven't seen before. But the director hadn't done a film in 5 years. He'd only done commercials. And Boyle was like, yeah, that's the guy who I want for this film, which is crazy. And he hasn't gone on to do anything ridiculous since then. So I do wonder if it kind of hampered his career with the fact that the film wasn't as highly regarded as the first one, in any sense of the word, although it did receive positive reviews across the board. One of the interesting things about production of this film is that the writing process was a struggle. The film was written and then rewritten multiple times over. They had to go back to talking to Alex Garland, who helped with little bits of the rewrites. But with every new rewrite that came through, they would steal a tiny little element and drag it onto the next one, which meant that it just ended up being a bit of a muddle between different ideas and different stories. And that's very clear when it comes to the final film. You've got a very distinct tone set in the first kind of scenes and stuff like that, and then you have a very different tone with things set across the rest of the film, with a few different ideas being scattered across, whether it is the whole Don stalking his son kind of thing, the immunity to the infection, the neutral zone in London, the US Army's involvement, the kind of outbreak scenes when they finally happen, the kids going off and exploring the city. There are so many different ideas going on in this film, and I can understand why it ended up being a bit of a muddled mess. So that is very, very clear from the start. There was multiple rewrites, and they just couldn't decide on what would be kind of the lead focus of the film in the end, which is interesting to say the least. Some interesting tidbits in the film. All extras had to be trained in ballet or other movement-based skills, such as circus or gymnastic performance. This is very interesting because it gives the zombies that fluid element that comes with it, especially in kind of the early scenes of the film and across the film, when you see the different zombies, the different ways they react, or sorry, infected, and the different ways they react. The only ones that you could say were very starkly different to the ways that the zombie extras were kind of filmed would be characters like Don, played by Robert Carlyle, who's of course an actor. You don't expect them. Some of them are triple threat, some of them are double threat, even being to art and drama school and stuff like that. But at the same time, you don't fully expect him to be fully ballet trained, and his infected version of himself is very violent and very starkly different to the other infected in the film, which I think is actually one of the biggest kind of positives from the film, the inclusion of that character. Now, let's talk about very quickly the opening scene, because the opening scene is the most famous scene of this film, and it's the only scene that isn't filmed by Fresnadillo. This is the one scene that Danny Boyle came back for, the one part, and it is phenomenal. It builds the tension really nicely. You've got the John Murphy score coming back in. You're introduced to Robert Carlyle's character. You're introduced to his wife. You're also introduced to a variety of different characters who are basically cannon fodder from the start of the film. The tension build, the chase through the house, the violence that he displays from the very start towards the infected, only for him to abandon his wife and escape, be the only survivor out of a group of 6 from the start, who basically get taken over at the house. Phenomenal scenes of him running away from the house, seeing his wife disappear, seeing the infected running down the hill, trying to escape to the boat. It is such a good scene. I think it's the best scene in all of the... It's one of my favorite zombie outbreak infected scenes ever. It's one of my favorite horror scenes ever. It's just so violent and so just overwhelming with the different emotions, the sense of abandonment, the guilt that must come with that, the survival that takes place, him putting himself above all else. Don's character from the very, very start is shown to be that flawed hero, or at least that flawed character that we've got to follow throughout the film, who does some horrific things, but in the name of survival, being able to be that one who can get out alive. And that is absolutely crazy. And it's well displayed in that opening scene. I absolutely love it. And that was directed by Danny Boyle. That is the one scene that was directed by Danny Boyle. And of course, Danny Boyle is coming back for the next film. So Alex Garland's coming back as a full-time writer as well. So I'm hoping for more scenes like that, more scenes showing off, the pure survival instincts, the decision-making that people have to make to get out of those situations, as that is what this franchise does best, with those different characters. The filming direction itself was a combination of digital and production film cameras. It doesn't feel as raw as I said it was. It was a bit more Hollywoody, a bit more kind of not grounded, if anything, a bit more filmy, instead of being like a POV kind of you're there at the scene kind of style of cinema. As far as direction is concerned as well, there's a few homages in the film, including the Odessa Steps sequence from Battleship Potemkin, which is a scene in Battleship Potemkin. You've got the trolley going down the steps, and you've got people being shot. In this film, it is zombies taking out people on the steps and the military trying to shoot people down as they're going down. I really enjoyed that scene as well. That's one of my favorites from the film. The story actually follows a few different characters here, and this is where the confusion with kind of the direction goes. So it follows Doyle, who is Jeremy Renner's character, a soldier trying to keep a contained area of London safer than the city. Also follows Don, played by Robert Carlyle, a man who has relocated to the zone to keep his family safe. And it follows the family for most of the film. The family are a key focus of the film, the different ways that they react, and whether it's his son, his daughter, or himself, and reunited with his wife, who ends up having the carrier or being a carrier of the virus, not infected, but able to infect others. And then, heading towards the finale, we have the outbreak within the zone. The zone is going to get blitzed. It's going to get absolutely destroyed purely out of keeping it contained. They need to get to Wembley Stadium to escape. And Don, who is now a zombie, the character from the Kiss of Death scene, is an intelligent infected, one who has patience, one who doesn't attack immediately, one who sits in the shadows and hunts down its prey. It's got some fascinating ideas. I don't know if it all came together well. There are certain moments within the film which are absolutely fantastic, and there are other moments which are quite dull and just unfocused. And we have a lot of good cast members as well, a lot of famous actors and characters who are brought forward. So we got Jeremy Renner playing Doyle, we've got Rose Byrne playing Scarlett, we've got Robert Carlyle playing Don, we've got Idris Elba playing Stone, we've got Harold Perrineau playing Flynn, and we've got Imogen Poots playing Tammy. And I know that Imogen Poots and, of course, Cillian Murphy both said in interviews in the early late 2019, 2010s, that they would both want to return to the franchise. And that's kind of what has triggered this whole 28 years will finally be made kind of thing, which is crazy. But because there's so many lead characters, shall we say, so many characters to follow and different aspects of the film getting put forward, it does get a bit muddled. And that's where it loses it over the very streamlined version in 28 Days Later, as far as I'm concerned. I can be okay with the different style of filmmaking. I would have preferred a more raw feel again to this kind of film, to give it that horror aspect back in. It felt more like a thriller with horror elements thrown in instead of a pure horror film. But at the same time, too many characters, too many different strands, and some which I cared about more than others. I enjoyed the idea of there being carriers of the virus. I enjoyed the family stuff. And of course, I would have preferred to have followed Don's character throughout the entire film. Him turning into a zombie midway through from the Kiss of Death scene, which is, once again, one of my favorite scenes. It's fantastic. But at the same time, we then got the soldiers to deal with. We follow the kids for a lot of the film. There are so many different little elements that are thrown in, and it's almost too much at that point for the runtime of the film, at least. Like I said, John Murphy returns to give aspects of his original score, and A House in a Heartbeat returns as part of that amazing opening scene. And then other music is thrown in as well. It doesn't stray too far away from the first film as far as music is concerned. I quite like the score to both films. It's a shame that the next film, I believe, is going to have a slightly different score to it, as I do not believe he is returning. Let me no, he's not returning. We got Hilda, I cannot pronounce her last name, Goethe, and Young Fathers as well, doing some parts of the score as well. So it'll be a very different score to the film. But anyway, let's go on to the impact on release. So it had a budget of 15 million, quite low once again. It made 65.8 million, so not as much as the first film. It was viewed more in the UK, seen as the success of the first film kind of already spread at that point. Still quite a big success in the US. Its critical reception was really good, actually. Really good critical reception at the time. It's not loved as much as the original, and is often overlooked over the original. However, the opening scene, like I said, is regarded as the best scene out of the two films, which is very, very interesting. And that has received, a lot of kind of not mimicry or not anything like that, but it's received a lot of attention of film fans online saying it's one of their favorite horror film scenes of all time, one of the best zombie film scenes of all time. It's had an impact in that sense of people know that scene more than they know the film. And if a scene is more famous than the film itself, then it's a good it's an impactful scene in that sense. Other than the opening scene, I like the battleship scene, battleship step scene, with the zombie outbreak already taking place, and the soldiers having to try and pick off who they can to get people to survive running down the steps, and also Don turning, Don reunites with his wife, he kisses his wife, and then him becoming the violent, stalking, patient, infected, at the mid-turn point of the film. I like those scenes. But saying that, I liked it, but it doesn't stand up to the original. It just doesn't. The original is a complete film. This film feels like a jumble of ideas, with great individual scenes, but the overarching kind of weaving together of the film itself is nowhere near as good. You've got some scenes which are, I'd say, quite terrible with the CGI used in them. It would have been better to use actual locations or actual kind of, I don't know, it felt a bit goofy and cheesy in some parts, including the helicopter scene where it mows down the people and mows down the zombies in the field, and getting to the stadium at the end. Nothing feels real at that point, and it just feels very off to the tone of the film. But the opening scene is elite, very, very elite, and I will continue speaking its praises. But I want to know what your thoughts on 28 Weeks Later are, especially with the excitement building for 28 years. It's only a few days away now. I'm going to be very much looking forward to seeing it. So please drop me your thoughts below, because I'd be very interested to see what you all think about that. And of course, please go and follow us on all of our socials for updates on the new film, when everything's coming out. Let me know when you've seen the new film and stuff like that as well, on there, and you can find out when we are going to be putting up our review for that as well. And also be sure to, follow us, like, subscribe, all that jazz, and go and grab some merch from our Redbubble store. Anyway, thank you ever so much for watching the 28 Weeks Later retrospective review, and we'll see you on the next one.